Look his face.
Yeah.
He's dangerous.
He's special.
You can like.
The guy is special. Everything that could possibly be special about this guy is special. A guy like this is the type of guy that you love to watch and follow. The most special guy that I've ever come across.
Hello and welcome back to the Pat McCoy Sports Show presented by Prospect Apparel. Today we are joined by AllStar Sport journalist John Hyon Ko. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. How about you?
Doing well. Now, initially, early in your career, what drew you to covering MMA? Like, what did you see a fight or something that was like, man, MMA is the best sport in the world?
I think it's more of like a accumulation of just watching the sport. I watched the UFC when it first came out in like the early 90s on pay-per-view. And then I just didn't watch it again for I don't even know how many years. Then when I got back to Korea, I started watching Pride when Pride was happening in 2004. And I just kept watching it, watching Pride, watching the UFC again. And then years and years later, I just thought, like, is anybody covering the sport out here in Asia, for like English language? And there wasn't much out here. I think there was maybe like 2 websites. And I just messaged one of the websites and got in contact with the owner of it and decided to just jump in and see what I can do with it.
And was journalism always a thing that you wanted to do when you were younger? Like, was that your dream to be a journalist?
Nah, that was never a thing that I wanted to do, and I'm not really a journalist actually. So I don't really consider myself a journalist. I just think that, there's people that do journalism, I think that's a tricky word to like just label yourself as a journalist when maybe you probably didn't even go to school for it. Like, I never went to school for any of this stuff. Like, I just learned everything on my own, basically. I did go to school, but not for this in particular.
What did you go to school for, if you don't mind me asking?
I went to school for criminal justice.
Criminal justice. And did you complete that degree, or? Yes,
I did. But it's, usually when you get a criminal justice degree, you become a cop. And I didn't want to become a cop, so I just decided to do other things with my life.
And I want to ask you, you've got a wealth of experience doing interviews with fighters. Do you have a favorite person you've ever sat down and done an interview with?
Favorite fighter? It's hard to say. I've done I don't even know how many interviews over the last, I don't even know how many years, to be honest with you. Some good people to interview that I've developed relationship with is, of course, like Alex Volkanovski. I started interviewing him back when he was like the PXC champ, which was before the UFC, before anybody knew who he was really. And and he's always been a good interview, even before he was the pound for pound, before he was the champion. He's always been the same guy, which I can respect, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of people, once they get really busy or they become more famous, or and you can't really blame them for not being accessible as they were when they were a younger fighter. But he's one of those guys that I could message, and even though he's busy, he tries to find time in his schedule to do an interview, which I could always respect. And he's always good interview. Who else? Kama Worthy was always a good interview, man. I always remember just always having good laughs with him when I used to interview him, and he just retired, which all the respect to him, for having a career that he had and putting himself on the line and taking the risks, man. He probably did more than he probably ever expected with his career. I don't know for sure, but yeah, he's always been a good interview. And who else is there? Randy Brown. Gilbert Burns. A lot of the guys that I like to interview is guys that I knew before they became these stars. Yeah. Guys that were hungry, guys that were up and coming, guys that they didn't have a name, they didn't have a verified account, those type of guys over the years, they've always been the best interviews because you get to know them. And you could just Dan Hooker, for a huge example, Dan Hooker is always a good interview. And one thing good about interviewing people that you interviewed many times is that you always have to come up with something different. You can't just say you can't just ask them the same thing over and over again, because it's like, I don't know. I think when you're a fighter, you don't want to answer the same things over and over again. And I learned that over the past couple of years that, I can't have the same questions. Some of the questions, of course, are repetitive, but you got to bring something to every interview. And especially with guys that you've interviewed, 5, 6, 7 times, because if you ask them the same question from the first interview in the third interview, I think they'll remember most of the time that you asked them that question. But you might not remember because you've interviewed so many guys throughout the year that you forget like what you asked who and who you interviewed. And and you got to keep it fresh and always be ready to, bring something out the hat. You know what I mean? Like a rabbit out the hat. You got to do that. If you don't, I think a lot of the times what fighters do is if you interview somebody for the first time, it can be nerve-wracking, but also it's probably easier than interviewing them for the 5th time.
Yeah.
And I look at fighters that I've interviewed maybe 10 times as guys that I like to interview.
And that's what I experienced when I was in America in August. I did some work with a promotion in Massachusetts called Cage Titans, and their lightweight and now welterweight champion as well, Joe Giannetti. I worked with him a lot because he fought in July, and then I interviewed him after that fight, and then he signed his next fight pretty quickly, and we did a fight week interview when I was there. And then also seeing him with the post-fight interviews and everything, I was there for the whole thing, so constantly, and the press conference as well. So, I had to keep having a new question instead of just asking all the same questions.
And that's the problem we get now, with a lot of people that do interviews or even people in press conferences, it's I don't know, people complain about it. Like, I don't blame a lot of people for asking a certain type of question, at press conferences or media days or whatever. It's their job. Maybe someone is telling them to ask those types of questions. I have no idea, but it's not an easy job, man. It's not, especially face to face. Like in those types of moments, like those are some big moments for fighters. Sitting in front of like those massive crowds, and even for yourself to ask a question, it can be nerve wracking.
Yeah,
and I gotta respect people for that. I can't complain about that because I'm not in that position. I don't go to the press conferences, and I don't want to. Like, I don't like fight weeks and all that, like covering events. It looks glamorous to a lot of people, and a lot of people they love it, and a lot of people they want to do it. But I've done it, and it's something that I don't prefer.
It's definitely a lot of work. That's what I experienced when I was there. I was in and out of media rooms. I loved it, and it was a glimpse into the future, right? But it is a lot of work, and even when you're just sitting there watching one of the fights when you're at the events, you have to still be constantly thinking about the next question you're going to ask.
Yeah, you do. And it's, I don't know, I don't think it's fun. Like, I'll do it, and I'll probably do it in the future for certain promotions, but it's something that I don't prefer. I'd rather just sit down with the fighters and just talk to them, just conversate with them, just try to get them to open up about stuff and get them to show more of themselves, and to allow the fans to get a better understanding of like who they are outside of just wins and losses and highlight reels. And
the UFC recently announced they're looking at coming to South Korea, I believe. Do you have any guys that are going to be on that card, other than obviously most believe that the Korean Zombie is going to be on that card? Any other names that we can look out for on that one?
I'm pretty sure a lot of the fighters, like Asian fighters, will be on the card. I'm just guessing. This is not something that's like written in stone, but the Sting, the featherweight, he's now training over at Sanford or Killcliff. He'll probably be on the card. Yeah. The Korean Superboy, Kang Kyung-ho or Kyung-ho Kang. Who else is there? There should be some Australian fighters as well.
Yeah.
Australian New Zealand fighters that will likely. I'm thinking that they're going to bring in fighters that are not able to fight stateside because of visa issues. They'll probably put them on that card, just like the card, the Perth card, which will be a few weeks after that.
Do you think that's where they'll round out the Road to UFC event? Obviously, I believe the semifinals have concluded in Abu Dhabi. Do you think they're going to do the finals in Korea, or do you know exactly where they're going to be? Well,
I think that they have an option, right? They can do it in Korea. They have 3 Korean fighters in the finals. You got both flyweight finalists there, Korean, and then the featherweight finalist is Korean as well. You got a couple Japanese fighters and Chinese fighters that are in the finale, and like I think one Indonesian and one Indian.
Yeah.
Those those are all in the area. You know what I mean? Like I think the farthest flight would probably be from India, which is like 10 hours or something like that. But I think that Indian fighter, he trains in Bali, Indonesia.
Yeah.
So I don't know how far Bali is from here, but by looking at what they've done, the first round was in Singapore for UFC 275.
Yeah.
This time it's UFC 280 in Abu Dhabi. If everything points to like a big weekend, then it would be most likely 284 in Perth, because that's what they've been doing. But who knows? Who knows what the UFC is going to do.
And in Perth, obviously, I think we've just gotten our answer for the main event. Obviously, Islam Makhachev winning over the weekend over Charles Oliveira, calls out Volkanovski for the title. How do you see that fight going? It's a very interesting fight on paper, obviously, Volkanovski moving up to 155.
Well, you have to look at Islam as a major favorite in that fight, right? It's his weight class. He's big for the weight class. He's ran through everybody in the division. Now he's the champion, and I like that he went out there and called out Volkanovski instead of just like brushing him off or saying like he'll fight whoever the UFC wants him to fight. He actually, I don't think he said that. Habib said that, right?
Yeah, Habib said it, but I think they were both kind of like thinking it, or maybe Habib's just kind of in charge of Islam's kind of career. It seems to be what it is like.
Well, that's great for them because it's a storyline now. It's a pound for pound. He's the pound for pound.
Oh, it's going to be a great fight for sure.
Yeah. So he's the pound for pound. He's the featherweight champion. He moves up. The story was before the fight that he was the backup, and there was a lot of media for that. And then Islam, he's just carrying the hype forward to the next event, and he's going to go into his backyard in Australia to go after that pound for pound status. Because if he beats Volkanovski, then he could take the #1 spot for pound best in the world, right? And that's what they want to do: hold the lightweight belt and be the pound for pound best. You got to give the favor to Islam, but you got to think Volkanovski. There must be a reason why he wants to move up. You know what I mean? You got to respect him for taking a chance, because guess what? Habib didn't take the chance.
Yeah.
He was undefeated. He was the best in the world. He still didn't take the chance. You know what I mean? To become even greater than he was. And like Israel Adesanya, he had an undefeated record. He went up to light heavyweight, took the chance, lost. You know what I mean? Now his record's, but I don't look at those losses as something that takes away from their greatness.
No.
These guys are goats, man. Volkanovski is a goat. Now, if he goes in there and gets double champ status and beats Islam, then he exceeds a lot of people in that GOAT list.
I mean, for Volkanovski, it would be huge if he beats Islam Makhachev in Australia as well. I think that cements himself as one of the top 5 even. You could slide him into that conversation, because if you look at who he's beaten, Ortega, Max 3 times now, which is crazy. I think Max only had 3 losses before the trilogy, so to do that is pretty impressive. But Charles Oliveira is also an interesting spot now. Obviously, I don't feel like he had to take the Islam Makhachev fight. He had a few other offers. But where do you think Charles Oliveira goes from here after the loss to Islam Makhachev?
Oh, he had to take the Islam fight.
I think there were a few other options, though. He could have...
Who else was there?
I mean, Dustin Poirier. He could have waited on Dustin Poirier and Michael Chandler if he really wanted to.
But he already beat both of those guys.
Yeah, true, but the Michael Chandler one, that was the one that was like the closest to him being beaten. Because he got
but you can't count who's the closest to be beaten. You know what I mean? The dude went in there and finished him. There's a difference between like a decision and it was very close and he won a split decision. I could see that argument, but when you go in there, even though you got hurt, you come back and finish the guy. The guy has to do a little bit more work than just win like 1 or 2 fights, right? He beat Tony Ferguson. That's not a title eliminator type of fight, right? If you look
you're right. I mean, he could have taken one with Beneil Dariush. I know Beneil Dariush isn't like the brightest star or anything by any means, but I mean, he is a contender. Obviously, look at what he did over the weekend fighting Mateusz Gamrot and beat him. He dropped him as well.
Beneil Dariush would be an option. Yeah, that. With Charles, I think he's probably gonna have to end up fighting Beneil now.
Yeah.
Either Beneil or he's gonna have to fight one of the guys like a little bit down the list, like maybe number 9 or number 7.
Yeah,
number 8.
I could see them doing like maybe Rafael Fiziev Obviously, I think Fiziv's going to be looking for a fight now. But that's why I think Fiziv Gamrot would be an awesome fight as well. Another fight between young animals, right? Matus Gamrot is an amazing fighter, so is Rafael Fiziv.
Yeah, either one would be good. I think since Fiziv is coming off a win, that's probably going to be a stronger argument for him.
Yeah.
And his style is probably going to be much more fun to watch.
Yeah.
Compared to Gamrot. We kind of seen like what level Gamrot is right now. Beneil showed that if you defend the takedowns, you could win the fight.
Yeah,
for
sure.
Because he's not doing that much damage. You know what I mean? Even in the Arman fight, he didn't do as much damage as Arman, but he won because he was just so active and he wrestled really well and he scrambled really well. But I think Gamrot's gonna have to go back and fight somebody. I think Gamrot should fight RDA. I think RDA is sitting there.
RDA, I think he's looking at he isn't looking at title contention anymore. I think he's looking at more fights that he could get some good money, maybe slightly easier matchups. He's fighting Barbarena on December 3rd in Orlando.
Oh yeah, he's going up to welterweight. That's right. So we might not never see RDA at lightweight. So
no, I think RDA's got 1 or 2 fights left. I can see him retiring if he beats Barbarena. I can see him retiring after that because he's had an amazing career.
Yeah, you gotta take him out the list. Then you gotta take him out the rankings. I also think Conor could be able to fight Oliveira. I think that could be an option as well.
I find it funny, like on Twitter, how quickly people turn on fighters, and I think Conor's one of those ones that people turned on so quickly after he lost to Dustin Poirier. And, they're saying Charles will annihilate Conor and things. I think that's a closer fight. I said this back when there were rumors about Conor fighting. I think Conor versus Charles Oliveira would be a very good fight, and I think Conor can win that fight.
Yeah, it's a good fight. It's a good fight because Charles will initiate the striking with Conor. But if it goes to the ground, I think Charles would tap him.
If it goes to the ground, it's Charles' fight. But I think knowing how Charles, he'll go forward almost like reckless abandonment and chin in the air. If Conor can catch that chin, it might be lights out for Charles Oliveira.
Oh, definitely will be lights out for Charles Oliveira if that happens. Yeah. But it's like you don't know what Conor's doing, man.
I don't know. Do you see his?
It's all fantasy with Conor. Like, it kind of sucks to be talking about Conor because like he's not even being like tested by USADA, which means like he can't fight for 6 months.
Dana said he has to be tested for 6 months, but he's talking to Volkanovski right now on the timeline.
Yeah, but he's talking. Why are we following someone that's just talking? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, well, I think Volkanovski, to be fair, initiated it a little bit.
Well, that's because Conor tweeted something out about like these 2 guys are holding my belt.
True.
Yeah, mine.
You're right.
Like, but even if Volkanovski's like talking back to Conor, Conor's just been talking the whole time.
Yeah,
he's just been like tweeting out things the whole time. So that's what he wants to do. You know what I mean? But should we even be considering him to fight anybody? I don't think so. I think Conor's not going to come back in the end of next year.
End of next year, really?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to come back that fast.
I see him summer next year, maybe. I think that's what he's targeting.
He's making movies. He's making movies.
Yeah, I think he's in the new Roadhouse. Is that what he's in?
Something, but he's making movies. He's doing all kinds of stuff that really doesn't, he's probably still training, but it's not like he's training for a fight. Yeah. And who knows what his leg is right now? Who knows? We don't know. If his leg is good. Did he injure his leg again?
I think he's training, though. I've seen him. He's been throwing kicks and stuff, so that's a good sign.
Yeah, but,
yeah,
I don't really read too much into all of that stuff. Conor is like, he's still in the rankings, which doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And him keeping himself in the headlines is a good thing, and I think it's a good thing for him because everybody eats it up. But me personally, I don't really care. Like, let's talk about him when he's like actually coming back, not like we're speculating him coming back. It's like talking about John Jones continuously.
Yeah.
But he's not. He doesn't come out and ever say he's coming back. You know what I mean? Like,
he said a few times that he was targeting UFC282 John Jones, but I think that window is past now. Yeah,
so I don't know, man. fantasy matchmaking with like fighters that are like out or with major injuries is something that I don't really like doing.
Yeah.
But it's fun. I see why it's fun for people to talk about it like that.
And over the weekend, we also had Aljamain Sterling defending his belt, and shocking to some, Sean O'Malley defeating Petr Yan. So obviously, the bantamweight division is now in an interesting spot. You have maybe 3 guys who are eyeing down title shots. You got Sean O'Malley, Chito Vera, and Henry Cejudo. I think is one that I could see Aljamain taking a fight with. What do you think?
Yeah. Henry Cejudo is an option. But you never know with Henry Cejudo. Like, last week he was saying, like, he doesn't want to fight anymore because Volkanovski's going to go up and get a title shot at lightweight.
Yeah.
Which, that was something that he wanted to do at featherweight, but the UFC didn't want to do that to him or do that for him.
Yeah.
And I could see why the UFC doesn't want to do that for him, right? He's not a draw.
I don't think Cejudo would do very well at 145. He's 3 inches shorter than Volkanovski, and Volkanovski's small for the weight class.
Yeah, to me, it doesn't matter, like, because Cejudo's a super athlete. Like, it doesn't matter how small he is. Like, he can go in there and compete. I'm pretty sure he trains with featherweights as well.
Yeah.
So, and his wrestling is phenomenal. He's Olympic level wrestling. And in MMA, it's phenomenal as well. Henry Cejudo's an option, but for Aljamain Sterling, he needs to cash in. And to cash in, he's got to fight Sean O'Malley. I think Sean O'Malley, even though he doesn't deserve to fight for the title, but he just beat the number 1 guy.
He did beat the number 1 guy, and that's.
And at the end of the day, it matters if you won or lost, not like if it was a controversial decision. Because when you do highlight packages, what you can use is, Dan Hooker was telling me this. He's like, it doesn't matter because in the highlight package you see Sean O'Malley raising his hand, winning the fight. Petr Yan is all bloody with a cut on his face, and they're gonna put all the punches into these highlight packages to make it look like it was a very good fight for Sean O'Malley, and they could hype this fight. And Sean O'Malley can hype the fight really well himself.
Yeah.
So I think the next fight they're going to do, and Aljamain should accept it, is Sean O'Malley. Because I think Sean O'Malley will have a really, really hard time against Aljamain Sterling. And, you know, you gotta strike where the iron's hot with Sean O'Malley. Right now he's hot, so you gotta let him take his chance, because if he becomes the champion, that's way better for the UFC.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, to have him as the champion, because he has a demographic that most fighters don't have, which is with the younger crowd, right?
Yeah, he's kind of got the pop culture, kind of like that Nelk Boys scene.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, the UFC is about money, and Sean O'Malley will bring the money. That's why they don't really want to entertain matchups for Cejudo, because he doesn't sell pay-per-views. No. And this is what I've been hearing from people, behind the scenes, is that's why. So Sean O'Malley, he gets eyes, and I think that's what they're going to do. I think they're going to do that in the early next year.
And Chito Vera is also in an interesting spot now. Chito Vera, he's been calling for the title shot. I believe he also called for the O'Malley rematch, even though he did beat O'Malley quite dominantly. Chito Vera, I thought Petr Yan, obviously Petr Yan might have some recovery time, but Chito Vera, Petr Yan, or even TJ Dillashaw could be good fights. They're still there's going to be like number 2 and 3, because Sean O'Malley is going to go ahead, but I still see that as a great fight. Either one.
I think Chito should fight Cejudo. I think they should fight for the number 1.
I think that's a high risk one for Chito Vera, because I'm not sure exactly what he has.
Well, he's not going to have a choice. He's not going to have a choice. If he wants to stay active, I think that's the fight to make, because then you just beat another former champion.
Yeah.
Right? The guy that retired as the champion. Or you could sit around and wait for O'Malley versus Aljamain to play out and hope that O'Malley wins. Because if O'Malley wins, then you hold a finish over O'Malley.
Yeah.
You have some power. You have some, you have some power to use to get that fight. But if you don't want to wait, then you fight Cejudo. TJ Dillashaw is going to be out for another year. His shoulder's it's a wreck. He said his shoulder popped out 20 times.
I feel like that was an exaggeration. Hearing that, I was like, why do you take a fight? Why do you go into a fight if your shoulder's popped out 20 times in your camp?
Because he's a psychopath. That's why.
I
Because
feel like that's
his
a bit
mind. His mind is like he has the championship mindset. He's everybody that I talk to that knows him, that have trained with him. He's a lunatic. Like he will do anything to win, just like he took PEDs to win, and he'll take his body to the extreme limits to win. He will not pull out the fight, and I think it might have been an exaggeration, but his shoulder is a wreck. It popped out in the first like 10 seconds of the fight.
It popped out partially because Aljamain took him down, and in the takedown, it was quite a forceful takedown. It was like a pick up and bring right down to the mat. So I think the shoulder hit, and it popped right out.
Yeah, but the thing is, it popped out, and then they popped it back in, and then he went on and fought with it for the next round, right?
Yeah.
What was it, next round? And then, and I think he's gonna be out. He's gonna get. He had double shoulder surgery when he was suspended by USADA.
Yeah.
And then he came back, jacked his knee up in the Sandhagen fight, got surgery for that, and now he's got his shoulder messed up. He's probably gonna be out for another year because he's gonna probably have to get surgery on his shoulder again. His body's falling apart, man. Like, I don't know. I don't think, he's going to be around to fight anybody anytime soon. So the matchups, I don't think it's going to happen unless he's a psychopath, like I said. So if he says, "Oh, I'm not going to get surgery. I want to fight some more." And I don't blame him for taking the fight. You know why? It's because how many chances are you going to get to fight for the title? Especially
not many.
With his name tainted, right? Like his name is tainted forever. Even though he was one of the best fighters that I've ever seen fight, his name is tainted forever, so he's gonna take the chance, right? He's gonna try to get a payday, and it sucks, and to see that happen, and I think a lot of people felt like they got ripped off, and you're right to feel ripped off, but the dude, he's a winner, and he will do anything to win, and he'll go into any fight in any circumstance, and he took his chances, and I can't blame him for taking his chances. You know what I mean? A lot of people don't take chances, and their life is mediocre.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but I don't think he's going to be back anytime soon.
And an upcoming pay-per-view, I believe, is November 12th, Adesanya versus Pereira. That's that's a fight that's getting a lot of hype now. It's really heating up on Twitter right now. How do you see that one going? Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira.
Man, that's a hard one. I think, Pereira, he's like really big, and I'll be interested to see if he can make weight.
Yeah, I think Dominic Reyes posted very recently. Now Pereira is definitely looking a little bit slimmer, but he's still in ridiculous shape. I mean, being what was he, 9% body fat? Like 2 months ago. That's a little bit worrying for Alex Pereira fans, if I had to think about that.
Yeah, but he's massive, right?
He is huge. I think he was 212 pounds and 10% body fat or something ridiculous.
Yeah, so he's huge, number one. So is he going to be able to handle 25 minutes of fighting? Because I think it's going to take a lot out of him to fight.
I think that was one of the questions about him when he was kickboxing, was his cardio. I think I would have to rewatch, but the Bruno Silva fight, I think he slowed down a little bit as well.
And the thing is, the ring is much smaller than the cage, the pay-per-view cage, right? So Adesanya has a lot of room to work with, and he's more used to fighting in that cage, right? He can control the cage. He can slip and he can cut off angles probably better because he's so used to the cage. He has so much time inside of that place, and he has so much time in big UFC fights. The UFC is different from Glory. The type of the hype, the fight weeks are completely different. So will that get into Alex Pereira's head? I don't know. I don't know. In the fight, size will play a factor, power, and also game planning, right? Game planning each other. Like if they get into a full-on kickboxing match, will Pereira be able to land anything on Adesanya, especially with the smaller gloves? And if he does, can Adesanya take those shots?
Yeah.
Those are big questions in this fight. And that's why the fight is so interesting, is because Adesanya has been pretty flawless, and then he's shown kind of cruise control in his last couple of fights. Will he cruise control against someone that has beaten him before? Will he will he come out and be more emotional? You know what I mean? Will his ego get the better of him and you get into a gunfight with Pereira? Like, these are all questions, right? And that's why it makes it interesting. But I think Adesanya is going to be much smarter in there. I think Adesanya is going to mix it up. I think Adesanya is going to clinch in there a little bit. I think he'll even like maybe attempt a takedown somewhere, maybe a couple takedowns, and he's going to show like a more mixed martial arts approach to this fight and win. I don't know if he's going to finish him, but I think he gets a decision, and it'll probably be a dominant decision. Like, he'll like 4-1, you know what I mean? Like, he'll lose a round maybe because, you know, Pereira clips him or something, and he has to fight through that.
Yeah.
But if Pereira wins, I think he wins by knockout.
Yeah, if Pereira wins, it's definitely a finish. I don't see Pereira winning a decision against a guy like Israel Adesanya. But to close out this video, I wanted to get your official predictions on Carla Esparza Weili and Chandler versus Poirier.
Carla Esparza versus Weili. That's an interesting one because Carla's going to go in there and she's going to have the same game plan she has for everybody else. Can Weili defend the takedowns? And if she does get dumped on her back, can she get back up? I think she will. And then what's going to happen is Weili's going to start piecing her up on the feet. And I think the fight will go into like the third round or something like that. But I see Weili getting the finish.
And Michael Chandler versus Dustin Poirier, obviously that's a fight I think we're all circling when we look at the card, right? That's going to be maybe a potential fight of the year. How do you see that one playing out?
Chandler, he's more of a guy that puts like single shots, right? It's more single shots with him. And Poirier is very good with his boxing and combinations. But Poirier, I don't know, his last fight, it just didn't look good at all.
Great.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Chandler in this fight. I think Chandler goes in there and lands a bomb.
Lands a bomb.
Do you think lands a huge bomb?
If Chandler does finish him, do you think it'll be early or late?
I think this fight's going to finish early. These guys are going to go at it.
Yeah.
I think Chandler is going to want to engage quick, and he'll mix in the takedowns as well, just to get Poirier to think. Like, he'll go for takedowns and he'll just get Poirier thinking, and then he's going to come over the top with a bomb, and then and swarm and finish Poirier. But Poirier's, he's not going to go out easy though. You know what I mean? I think he's going to fight back, and it's gonna be like one of those like Justin Gaethje
type finishes.
Michael Chandler. Yeah, like that. It's going to be crazy like that.
All right, now I'm going to leave you with my prediction. I'm going to go with Pereira. I think Pereira will catch Adesanya. I also predicted O'Malley beating Jan last time, so maybe that's my wild card pick there. I do believe Weili will beat Carla Esparza. I think if Weili wins, it'll be by finish, and if Carla wins, it'll be by decision. And I believe Chandler will take a third-round knockout against against Poirier. I think he'll catch him in the last 2 minutes, and the ref will step in on it.
Yeah, that sounds good, man. Sounds good. I'm terrible at predictions, so if you're bet, please don't not.
I don't bet. I'm not old enough to bet yet, so.
I've never bet in my life.
I see a lot of people betting, like Ben the Bane Davis. He posts his bet slips all the time, but I've never bet. I have Verdict. That's my betting. You know the thing where you bet the XP and you get the medals?
No, I don't even use Verdict, so I have no idea.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this, John. It was great talking to you.
No worries, man. No worries.